Hello and welcome back to NPC, that stands for Next Portable Console. It's a show about the games we take with us, and unlike other companies, we're still making discs. I'm Federico Vitici, and I'm joined as always by Brendon Bigley.
Hello, we're making discs, we're making flash drives, we're making physical cartridges. Buddy, we got everything you want, as long as it's physical.
Yes. And we're also joined by John Voorhees. Hello, John.
Hello. I'm really looking forward to an episode coming out on a Nintendo 64 cartridge. I think that's how I want to consume this show.
I will say, when I released my Metroid Fusion review last year, somebody took it and turned it into a Game Boy ROM.
Oh, I remember that.
That you can actually play and watch the review on
That
your,
is incredible.
on your Game Boy.
Did you see that there's now a project that lets you watch your YouTube videos on the Game Boy Color?
Oh,
I saw.
No, I didn't see that. That's incredible.
I saw it too. It looks absolutely terrible. But
of course.
But you can actually search YouTube, pick videos, and play them back.
That's the way Christopher Nolan intended for his movies to be watched on a Game Boy Color. YouTube clips of his movies on a Game Boy Color. That's the way.
This is amazing.
Yes, I know, right? I saw that fly by, and I thought to myself, I cannot believe this is real, but here we are. We have some follow-up. First of all, we need to address the elephant in the room, which, by the way, we can talk about the elephant in the room later. There's part of another topic. Did we or did we not get the Steam Machine? John?
Well, last week I said I wasn't even going to sign up for the email list, but
And?
I was peer pressured a little bit. I did sign up for the list, and I did not get it, and I don't feel bad about it.
Okay. Brendon?
So I had signed up for the 512 with controller configuration. I did get an email that says I am officially in the reservation queue, and I have not heard back since. So that was that was 6 days ago. I got the email saying I was in the queue, and I still haven't received it. So I guess I'm still on the precipice of needing to make a decision.
How do we know how this is going to work? Like, are they going to stage these emails over time? Is it all going to be all at once?
I suppose so, because I sure am seeing people post that they've gotten theirs in the mail already.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So, okay.
Like, if you go on the Steam Machine subreddit, it's just flooded with people who already have their units.
I
about you?
did sign up, and I got an email saying that I didn't make it.
Yeah.
That I was not part of the reservation queue. And they were saying, hey, but maybe somebody will cancel, and if a spot frees up, well, maybe you will be in a queue or not. Who knows?
You signed up for 2 terabytes. So did I think, right?
Yeah. And I thought I was going to get it, but no. So
yeah, I wonder if, because we talked about this last week, that I thought was the right one to sign up for because it was the highest spec model, most expensive.
Right.
The least amount of people would probably try to get that. What is occurring to me literally right now in this moment is it's also so expensive to buy those parts. They probably don't have very many of that model in particular.
That's kind of why I did it, in part because I thought upgrading down the road might be more expensive than the $300 difference that they were charging.
That's fair. If I didn't have a little bowl right here filled with micro SD cards that I could throw in the front, I would probably do the same.
So no Steam Machines for any of us at the moment. We'll
Sadly
see in the
not.
future. John, I think you have something to mention in the follow-up.
Yes. Well, when we were at WWDC, Federico, we ran into the crew from Delta, the iPhone and iPad emulator app. And right before we went to WWDC, they announced something that's kind of cool. They worked with the Epilogue folks, and you can actually plug your Epilogue operator right into the bottom of your iPhone using a USB-C cable and use those cartridges with Delta. And you might wonder, why would you want to do that? Well, you might want to play on an iPad, where I think that would probably be the best situation to do that. But it's also a way to see if a cart is working, if you're buying one from a store or something like that. So I think it's a neat little feature that they've got. So I was glad to see that they were working together on that.
Yeah.
Does it work with both the Game Boy operator and the Super Nintendo operator?
I assume it works with the Super Nintendo, but I don't know. I think the announcement I saw was before the Super Nintendo one was out, so it
Yeah.
definitely worked with the Game Boy operator.
I think there's something very interesting about. I think, yeah, I wrote that piece for Mac Stories forever ago about the idea of using your iPad as like your console. And I think there's something very interesting about having literally like a cartridge slot built into that setup and saying like I could just plug a Chrono Trigger cartridge in there
Yeah.
and then be playing a game. That is very cool to me.
Attach it with magnets like Federico would do to the back of your iPad.
You can do things, you know.
You can do. I've been told you could do things.
Yeah.
Love to do things.
We have also another line in the follow-up saying, "What does Brendon think of the RG55G1?"
I've been thinking about this for weeks now because this was announced when I wasn't here.
Yes.
Yep, same. Yeah.
I think it's all kind of boiled down to one sentence, which is I appreciate Ambernick's constraint not calling this the RG Switch Lite.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Because it just looks like a Switch Lite,
Yeah.
Yep.
which is great. It's probably my favorite form factor that Nintendo has had for the entire Switch library. And, you know, that device is not going to be able to play Nintendo Switch games that well. So, shout out for not calling it the RG Switch Lite.
Okay. Well,
But it's cool. I mean, I'm glad to see Ambernick kind of getting into the Snapdragon world.
Yeah.
yeah, finally. Okay, so the main topic is going to be PlayStation on this week's episode for really three main reasons. Something that they're doing with physical games media, the PS3 and the PlayStation Vita stores, and a statement that they made about the future of PlayStation beyond the living room. So let's start with the bad news and the reason why PlayStation is getting dunked by just everybody on Twitter and other places, including Nintendo itself, which is funny. They published a blog post saying that they're ending physical disc production in January 2028, and new games sold on PlayStation consoles will basically just be digital only, and that's including when you go to a retailer. You will be able to buy, I guess, a box, like a physical plastic box, but inside there won't be discs anymore starting in 2028, just download codes to get a digital game over the internet. Now, we can talk about this. We can also talk about the fact that Sony had the brilliant idea of timing this announcement with another announcement, which is, I would be so curious to learn exactly the kind of process that Sony PR, PlayStation PR thought of here, because you time this announcement with another blog post on the PlayStation blog saying, oh, by the way, and it's titled "An Update on PlayStation Store for PS3 and PS Vita." And when you see these blog posts by these companies saying "an update on," it's never good news.
No.
So they're closing the PlayStation Store for PS Vita and PlayStation 3, and they're shutting them down in multiple phases. They're gonna start with Mexico, Honduras, and Nicaragua in 2 months, in August.
Oh, that's
and
quick, yeah.
and
God.
they're going to continue with additional Latin American and Middle Eastern countries later this year. And then they're going to shutter them for good next year in July 2027 in the rest of the world. So US, Asia, North America, everywhere, Europe, everywhere. So the process here is we announce that we're getting rid of physical media, and also we announce that the only source of digital games, we're also shutting that down. Now, obviously, the PS3 and the PS Vita are no longer in production. They're not
Right.
consoles that are being sold anymore. But I think, and we can talk about physical games media in general, but the thing is, the problem is that even though they're not consoles you can just go out and buy as new devices on the shelf, the PlayStation Store is the only way to still access games from your account on those consoles.
Right.
So this means that if you have a PS Vita from your childhood And at some point in August 2027, you'll be like, oh, I wonder what I had in my PS Vita account. You will not be able to download those games anymore.
Well, I thought it was just that they're closing the store, that the downloads are going to continue indefinitely, that they're only closing purchases.
Is that confirmed?
Did I read that? Is that my wishful thinking, you guys?
Previously, okay, so
To
previously
ease the transition,
for
players
the
will still be able to
foreseeable future.
foreseeable
okay?
future.
Yeah, that's.
So you will
I mean,
not be
so
able.
good news, bad news, right?
Good news, bad news.
I looked at that because I immediately looked at that because when I moved, I lost my Vita. I have no Vita, but I know I have a lot of Vita games stored in the Sony store. And
same.
I wanted to know whether I should go out and buy a used Vita right now just to make sure that everything's on there like I did when when Nintendo started shutting down the 3DS store. I made sure everything was on micro SD cards on actual hardware that I could use. So this is just purchases for now. Eventually, though, the whole thing is supposed to shut down.
Yeah. This is, on one hand, I'm wondering if this is like a left hand isn't talking to the right hand of it all to have both of these announcements land on the same day. But I think that's unlikely. I think both of these announcements were planned to go out today. And I would imagine a bunch of people, probably not executive class within PlayStation PR, were like, this is a horrible idea. And they all talked about internally. This is just my guess from working in a PR section of a very large company.
Yeah.
A lot of people probably raised alarm bells saying, this is a horrible idea. And they went through with it anyway. Did not space these out. I think you kind of can't space out the PS3 and Vita stuff if it's going to start literally next month. Like, there's really nothing you can do there. But I have a hunch that the reason they're announcing the end of the physical media thing now instead of closer to the 2028 date when they say they're actually stopping is just because they felt like they got social permission from Rockstar when they announced that Grand Theft Auto 6 is not going to have a physical version.
I think that's a good point, yeah.
I think it's completely because of Grand Theft Auto 6 that this announcement is being made now. It's worth mentioning also because I've seen this coverage happening a lot in the video game space, but this has been an ongoing discussion in the physical media world for the past year-ish because Sony specifically are the rights holders and the creators of Blu-ray also, and they've been winding down Blu-ray production pretty consistently over the past 5 or 6 years at this point. That all culminated in an announcement, I think earlier this year, saying that they're going to be stopping Blu-ray production just completely at a certain point within the next couple of years. So everyone in the film physical media space has been flipping out already about this. And now it's hitting video games and it's, already, I'm surprised it hasn't hit music. It's amazing that you can go into a store and buy a CD still, thank God. But it just seems like it's kind of coming for everything. And video games is just kind of the last piece of media to get wrapped up in all this.
Yeah, and Sony doesn't have a great reputation for this stuff either. They have been known to pull things from libraries that someone had purchased down years ago, and it disappeared from their media libraries. That's happened in the past as well. So I think a lot of people are sensitive to it when it comes to Sony in particular. The other thing I think about this announcement, especially the one that the physical media is going away in January 2028, is that kind of gives us the earliest time period for when a new console would come out, because they're not going to put out a console before January 2028 with a physical drive in it. So I suspect that says it's at least a wait until 2028 for that, which is not surprising. That's essentially what the rumors have been saying anyway.
Right.
Look, I feel like I'm really ambivalent about physical games. Part of it is the fact that I can be a very nostalgic person who likes to reminisce about the times when I was in middle school and in high school, and I used to go to my trusted local video game shop. You know the deal. The classic.
Shout out Viterbo.
Shout out Viterbo. The name is Extra Ball. That's the name of the store.
Shout out Extra Ball. Shout out Viterbo.
And so there's that nostalgic component.
Yeah.
Then I also think, well, aren't you fine with all the games that you download from Steam? Aren't you okay with that? Like, you already have a games library that is digital only on your PC. And so what is it that makes you feel a certain way about physical games on a console versus having digital games on
Right.
PC? Right. And part of it, I guess, is the appeal of the idea of the console more broadly. Like, the whole pitch of the
Yes.
console was, you don't need to assemble a PC and download games. You just buy the box, buy the cartridge, put the cartridge in, play video game. Like, that was the pitch. And then things got more complicated over
Yes.
over the past few decades with updates. Like, when I started playing video games on Super Nintendo, there were no updates. Like, the game that you bought was the game that you got.
There wasn't DLC or anything
There
like
were no
that.
DLCs, no software updates, no expansions, nothing. And so things got more hybrid over the past 2 decades. And now we reached a point where you buy a Nintendo Switch 2 and you get a cartridge, and the cartridge is actually like something that needs to be downloaded from the eShop. Or you buy GTA 6 later this year and you get a plastic box, and inside the plastic box there are no 5 discs like, I don't know, Final Fantasy 15 or something. You get a code and and you gotta go and download. So all you're left with is the plastic box, right? And so on one level, I think, well, it would be nice, especially for games preservation, to retain access to a physical artifact that 30 years from now you can just take out of a box and put it into a console, and it lets you play a video game. But on the other hand, the entire video game industry. And now Sony is getting dunked on Twitter, but this is a problem for the entire industry. Video games have become so dependent on servers and updates, and they've become so computer adjacent that it's maybe impossible to go back to the time when you go to a store and you buy a Nintendo DS game and that game lasts you forever. Like, that ended 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Probably more. So
Yeah, I'm with you. It is. I understand where this kind of back and forth feeling about it comes from, because I am a person who basically exclusively buys games digital and has since the option to buy digital.
Yeah.
I have been buying
Yeah,
games
same.
digitally, and my reason for buying physical usually comes from like basically like saccharine or nostalgic reasons. It's always rooted in, this game means a lot to me, so I have
Yeah.
a copy of Hollow Knight behind me. You can't see it, but also behind me I have every Dragon Quest game and also 3 copies of Dragon Quest 11. You know, like when I'm collecting games, it's because
Yeah.
I feel a lot of emotion surrounding those games in particular. I'm not buying them, you know, just to play them or just to collect them. All of that having been said, when you watch something like the PlayStation Vita store get shut down or the PS3 store get shut down, and it prevents people from accessing those games ever again, and I think you brought up a great point, like it erases the value proposition in some ways of a console as an idea to no longer be able to revisit those games. You know, like if I took my Game Boy Advance off the shelf behind me and then put this copy of WarioWare Twisted in, I could play it right now. The idea that that's not going to be possible with the PlayStation Vita, hypothetically, in a couple months, or basically from this point forward, any console that gets released will not have that experience ever again. You know, because not only is PlayStation saying this, and people are implying it about the PlayStation 6, but Xbox has outright said that the Helix will not have a disc drive in it.
Right.
Yep.
Like that
Right.
is all digital, and it will be all digital. Nintendo is already obviously encroaching in this space with the game keycard idea, you know, saying like,
Yep.
we have a physical piece of plastic you can buy and put in the thing, but that's the last thing you're probably going to get. When whatever comes out after the Nintendo Switch comes out, like I'm sure that thing will be all digital. And Sony's been trying this since the PlayStation Go era. You know, the PSP Go in particular was the first time they tried to go all digital, and people revolted, and then they changed their minds about it in following consoles. And I just think the like march of time and technology will not allow people rising up against this idea to actually make a change this time around. I think it's just going to happen this time. And the last thing I'll say on that, I just think it's important to note is like PlayStation is in such an unbelievable state of dominance right now in this space. Like Xbox is such an afterthought, and their image as a company and as a console manufacturer is so diminished because of everything that's happened. And everything that's happening right now, like we're waiting for them to hypothetically close down like 4 or 5 different studios that they've acquired.
I just saw this morning that also Obsidian may be one of them.
Oh, really?
You
Wow.
know, and like also a bunch of these studios who just announced games at their Xbox showcase recently.
Right.
You know, all those games are getting canceled, et cetera, et cetera. It's just like we're just in this scenario where like PlayStation doesn't have to be competitive, and they can make a move like this and it won't affect them at all, really.
Right. Well, and because, as you said, Brendon, they're doing this with Blu-rays and things too. You get to a critical tipping point where it no longer makes economic sense to manufacture the plastic. I mean, they are accelerating that, but once they reach that tipping point, it's only going to accelerate further because there are only so many companies that are actually making physical media to begin with.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Sony's CEO, in an interview with Famitsu in Japan, they were talking about the future of PlayStation consoles, and they said they're looking at, they mentioned that the one of the most important qualities of a console is the pick up and play experience.
Right.
What we were just talking about, like the whole point of a console is that it kind of abstracts away the complexities that are typically involved with playing on PC. And for the future, they're looking at leveraging technologies that can be used in various forms and locations, going beyond the living room. It seems to me like PlayStation is basically hinting at what was also previously reported by Bloomberg and a bunch of other publications, that it looks like the PlayStation 6 family, it'll be a family of devices, including a console like a TV, living room console, but also a handheld component. Whether we're looking at a hybrid like the Nintendo Switch, or a PlayStation 6 portable and a PlayStation 6 Pro that goes into the living room, but those are two actually separate devices. It's not clear, but it's what seems pretty obvious at this point is that Sony is saying, well, we got to go beyond the living room. We got to offer a handheld.
Yeah.
Clearly going beyond the living room with VR has not worked out. So what's next is a handheld, is a return to form with a PlayStation handheld, which, I mean, sign me up. I am not really into this PlayStation generation. I was thinking about this a couple of days ago. It seems like, historically speaking, I've always been into every other PlayStation generation. I never got into the PS3, got really into the PS4, didn't really get into the PS5, and things are looking up for the PS6. So maybe this is just my thing. Every other PlayStation generation I'm into.
You're an even number kind of guy.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. What are we thinking here, guys?
I love the idea of a portable handheld from Sony. I think that's great. I was really bummed to see the Vita go away. I thought the Vita was fantastic, especially when they were focused on indie games. And I was really bummed to see it go. It's going to be hard for them to restart from, square one on this stuff, but they've got time. They're going to have to wait out all these part shortages. So yeah, I think it has a lot of promise.
I think realistically, this will probably be PC handheld size, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to scratch that Vita itch for me personally, because again, I say this all the time, and it's in the name of our podcast, but portability is important to me. And just because the thing is portable doesn't mean I'm going to take it out of my house. So when you say like it can go beyond the living room, I guess it could go to my bedroom or the bathroom are the options, because it's not leaving my apartment.
That is technically beyond.
It is beyond. They're not wrong about it. What I'd be interested in, It's worth grounding this in the rumor from Bloomberg, which stated
Yeah.
that the PS6 is actually going to be 3 devices. There's going to be 3 SKUs, a low-end, high-end, and then handheld version of the PlayStation 6 that'll all be called the PlayStation 6, kind of similar to what Xbox did with the Series S and X, but like throw the ROG Ally X in the mix hypothetically, and then you have like what PlayStation's thinking for the PS6. I'd be curious to see if they, because of the parts shortages and all that kind of stuff, if they don't just go with smaller, less capable model that's cheaper as an entry point into the generation that probably still ends up costing $1,000. And then also a handheld that has some kind of docking station that does the thing everyone thought the Switch 2 would do, which is that it becomes more powerful when it's plugged into whatever that dock is. I think that idea is one that has been kind of floating around for long enough, and it makes more sense for PlayStation to do it than Nintendo, in my eyes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I also think realistically we will be looking at $1,000 handheld for sure.
Yes.
And I would also bet on a 1080p display and something that leverages, and again, this is going to be the new normal, leverages AI-based upscaling, AI-based frame generation.
Right, to 4K.
Yeah. I mean, you know that's going to be the new normal when even Nintendo is doing it. So for sure, I mean, and to be honest, Sony has a pretty solid foundation, right? What's it called? PSSR with their version of...
Oh, right.
What's it called? Spectral resolution. Like that's actually pretty solid.
Somebody get Mark Cerny on the phone. He can explain it to us.
I mean, I'm sure he'd love to just...
I'm sure he would love to, actually.
35 minutes on PSSR.
Yeah.
So they
and
have,
I'd love to hear it.
Same. They have a really strong foundation, a good partnership with AMD. So I don't see why not at this point.
Right. They announced that collaboration between the two of them. So that's going to happen. And then also it's worth mentioning, one of the big stories from this week as well was that there's rumors that the cost of building the PlayStation 6 is upwards of $1,000 already.
Wow.
And I think in a world where all of these companies are simultaneously saying like we're done taking losses on our hardware, like that is behind us, that age is behind us. I mean, that's going to be an expensive
Which
box.
would also explain why you announced that you're getting rid of physical games, because making a console with a disk drive it's going to be more expensive too. So
that's true. And then also all these compounding things, right? So then it also means that they're forcing you to be buying through their store that they're getting a cut of every sale on as well.
Yep.
So they're not only making up for the lost revenue. Yeah.
They're cutting costs and they're forcing you to pay them a tax on every game is what it comes down to.
I think in a world where, and this is the more depressing thing, so sorry to be a bummer, but in a world where this hobby, like as video gaming becomes so expensive that it's really not a viable hobby for a lot of people to ever buy a new console again, realistically, once they get into the $1,000 and above range, and even below that, but still, like once we cross into 4 digits for a price, you need to start, if line must continue going up, then you need to start making money everywhere you possibly can on every single customer. You need to increase, I forget what that's called, but you need to increase the amount of money that every customer is making for you to make up for all of the customers you will be losing because you're no longer cheaply available.
The one thing I will mention before we move on is I am very curious to see if between now and 2028, there's going to be another revision to the PlayStation 5. We already have, I'm sure everybody has forgotten about this. We already have a PlayStation 5 Slim that is not really a PlayStation 5 Slim at all. Like it's not, remember the PlayStation 5 Slim?
I kind of forgot about it.
I don't remember that. Is that real? Are you kidding me?
I didn't hallucinate this, right? There is a PlayStation 5 Slim.
You're right.
There is a PlayStation 5 Slim that is not really slim at all. They announced... Did you totally forgot about this, Brendon?
Completely forgot about this.
Same here.
I was just thinking to myself, I hope they release a PS5 Slim. And
no, there is a PS5 Slim, and it's not really slim.
It's just shorter.
It's just shorter and not
it's
even
the same design. It just is shorter than.
Not
There's
even-
probably the smaller motherboard in it or something.
So let me tell you. So my PS5 history, I've had all the PS5 models. I did PS5. We call
course
it
you
PS5
have.
Fat for historical reference.
Yeah.
Then I moved to a Slim, and then I moved from a Slim to a Pro, and then I sold all of them. The PS5 Slim is the least slim revision ever. Like it used to be like I remember my mind was blown when Sony did announce the PlayStation 2 Slim. Now the PS2 Slim was really slim.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was.
That was
And
like
it
the
was-
size of the disk drive.
It was like incredible.
Yeah.
And the PS5 Slim is such a letdown compared to that. So it would be nice, especially since I bet that ever since the PS5 came out, there's been a lot of progress in making components smaller, more
Yeah.
power efficient, cheaper. Now, obviously, the current situation of the supply chain for components is not great. But it would be nice to actually have a PS5 Slim.
How about a Slim Pro?
A Slim
That's what-
Pro.
That's what it'll
Slim
be,
Pro.
right?
A Pro-
Slim Pro.
Slim Pro.
Slimmer. Remember the Wii Mini?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the Wii Mini.
Yes.
It's amazing that they made the Wii Mini. That was an all-digital device, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
No disk
Wii
drive
Mini.
in that thing.
There was never a GameCube Mini, which
There
is
was not.
unfortunate. So yeah, Sony is up to a bunch of things. I am glad that the PS5 Slim was not an hallucination of my own, but something that actually existed. But yeah, what are we going to talk about in NPC XL?
We have a couple things. Ambernick updated the RG Rotate
Yes.
Okay.
with some stuff that we were hoping for. I think John's got something for us.
I
My-
do.
my-
I do about the game porting toolkit. And,
Ooh, gaming on the Mac again. So we're
yeah.
gonna
Everybody's
revisit
favorite
that,
topic.
and we're going to talk about RG Rotate again.
I'd also like to talk about the Pocket Micro 2 in XL real quick.
We'll save
Yeah,
it
I was going
for
to say,
XL.
I wanted to talk about that too.
I want to
That's
talk
a-
about that really bad.
That's a weird story.
All right, we'll save the bad news for XL. John, where can
Yeah, let's wrap
people-
up all this good news.
Let's wrap up this very positive episode of MPC. Where can people find us and the show notes and everything that we do?
Oh boy, all sorts of places. Brendon's over at wavelengths.online and overworld.vg, and of course his other podcasts, Into the Aether, and so on and so forth. Then there's us, me and Federico at macstories.net, App Stories, another podcast about apps and Apple stuff. And of course you can find all three of us on social media. Just search for our names. You'll find us all over the place. Talk to you
All
next
right.
week, guys.
See you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.